So as per the recent leaks, there'll be a whole load of things that are coming to the Guard Codex, but unfortunately a whole load of things that are being cut out. Many iconic choices and options are disappearing. Let's talk about how hard these might hit the Guard. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today I thought we'd just focus on some of the potentially less good news from the big Guard leak the other day. It seems when Games Workshop give with one hand, they also seem to be taking away a bit with the other. And some really massive stuff that's been present for a good long time for the Guard seems to be going the way of the dodo, at least according to these leaks. As from last time, the leaks come from Morty and Glory. Well worth checking out his channel if you haven't done already. And while admittedly there were a fair few exciting things, such as a whole bunch of new units, platoons coming back in some form, useful commissar orders, and probably a big power boost, there do seem to be a fair few much loved options going, I feel all of which will be missed by some people, maybe some a bit more so than others. I would also bear in mind that at this stage these do remain leaks and rumours as opposed to confirmed changes to the Guard Codex. I would take everything with a pinch of salt until we've actually seen it in print, though most of these do seem at least fairly plausible for Games Workshop to remove, and I believe that in all likelihood most of these will turn out to be gone as predicted. At the moment it's looking like a short list of the casualties from the Guard Codex are veteran squads, special weapon squads, conscripts going though maybe white shields might remain, a bunch of special characters including Yarrick, Knight Commander Pask, Creed and Kel, the grinding advanced rule for Lehman Russes, regimental support options such as stratagems, warlord traits and things like that, and also some of the usuals messing around with special weapon choices and things, only being able to field what you can take in the kit. Putting it all together, it does sound like a fairly depressing amount of cuts to be honest, ones that may be worth talking through bit by bit. First up, I think one of the single changes that I'm most disappointed in are the veteran squads and special weapon squads supposedly going. These really are iconic options for the Guard that have been around for literally decades. They're both units that are very present in any Guard lore. You usually have special weapon squads attached to companies, and veteran squads represent the guys that have actually managed to stick around for a while and know how to fire a lasgun straight. And though Games Workshop doesn't sell any given kit that specifically labels special weapon squads or veteran squad or anything, we have had similar things survive in other codexes, say for example the Sisters of Battle Celestians and Dominions, both units that are basically the equivalent to the two units for the Guard, and both of those remain and are just buildable from the main Sisters of Battle kit. It does seem a little bit inconsistent that those guys would remain but these guys go. The units didn't really have official representation in any one box, though you could certainly make a veteran squad out of the infantry kit, you'd just want some extra special weapons from elsewhere. They really weren't too hard to get together though, you just used spares from the command squad box, or from the metal extra guardsmen that you could buy with special weapons, such as this pair on the right here, or convert them with special weapons taken from other factions. Perhaps not super intuitive for new players, but really not too hard to get together practically once you had a fair collection established. I think perhaps one of the wish list of a new Guard Codex would have been for veterans to get their doctrines back, things like their demolitions or forward operatives or things like that. That was really quite a fun rule from ages past, and it's a bit sad to see them go pretty much the other way and just get rid of the unit entirely. Models wise, I can't help but think it's a bit of a missed opportunity on Games Workshop's part. I'm not sure it would have really hurt them too much to make an alternate build for the Cadian squad in the box, to have the option of fielding a trio of each of the special weapons. Perhaps it might have been an extra sprue or so, but then that unit could have represented everything from the standard troops, veterans to special weapons all in one box. With veterans you might not even have had to go that far, they could have still kept the unit intact with their better ballistic skill and everything, and just do their typical thing of restricting the units to the sprue in the box. In game I can't help but think that it is going to have an impact on guard lists. It means that infantry are going to have far fewer options for delivering dangerous special weapons to the enemy. Perhaps things like chimeras might be a little bit less valuable as a result, and if you just want your standard infantry to be carrying the game a bit more, it does look like it's going to be up to the standard troops and heavy weapons. I guess if we are looking for replacements for them in the Guard roster, they do sound like there's still going to be plenty of options though. It seems like Kazakin and Scions will be more important to pick up the special weapon role. It sounds like they might even be able to get the standard regimental doctrines that the rest of the army does, even though they are a bit limited now, as we'll mention later. Otherwise, they have mentioned that Cadian shock troops will be a datasheet, and that'll allow you to take more special weapons, and maybe have an additional special rule or so. That could be quite fun to fill out the same role, I guess, though it is a bit weird and wouldn't really quite have the same feel. There may well be a datasheet for the Death Corps of Krieg as well. Again, they're really quite an in-depth and flexible kit with their kill team options, so that could give you a unit that's fairly similar to the veterans in feel. I guess if those units exist, you still might not necessarily need to use the specific prescribed Cadian or Krieg models. You could potentially just use your own models and just note them as different, maybe paint them in a different style or something, and explain clearly that these represent the shock troops datasheet. I feel like that would generally be pretty acceptable. Overall though, I do feel like these guys are perhaps one of the single biggest losses from the league so far. If there's one thing that I hope doesn't turn out to be accurate, then loss of veterans would probably be that. There might also be some sort of stratagem or upgrade or something that could give a squad a bit more of a veteran feel. Perhaps a pre-game command point upgrade or something like that wouldn't go amiss. Moving on though, there was an interesting and slightly conflicting leak that said that conscripts are going, but supposedly Cadian white shields are remaining. I'm a little bit unsure what to make of that. I hope that conscripts as a unit don't just completely go entirely, seeing as they're quite a fun alternate troops choice. Generally speaking, not going to do as much damage, though with Hammer of the Emperor that's maybe a little bit less true than before. But in general, a big and very durable unit that can be good for things like psychic buffs or individual one unit buffs. If they do remain in big massed up squads, then they look like they'd probably be the best unit for targeting with that 5+ invul psychic power, making them pretty annoying to shift from the board. I guess we'll have to wait and see what's meant by Cadian white shields. It could just be a 10-man infantry squad with worse fighting, but cheaper, but I would hope that there's a bigger option to build the squad into a larger unit than standard. If that exists, then it's basically still conscripts staying, but with another form, seeing as the regimental tags don't mean quite as much as they used to, what with selecting your own regimental traits and things. Overall, I'd be disappointed if conscripts go entirely, but I won't really mind too much if they just decide to arbitrarily rename them to white shields. Next up, and perhaps a bit of a disappointing surprise, are special characters for the Guard. It's maybe not too unexpected that Creed and Kel might be going away. Creed was captured by Trazin, and Kel was outright killed in the fall of Cadia. I feel like Games Workshop was paving their way for their removal quite a while ago, and now we know that Creed has been replaced by his daughter Ursula Creed, who's taken up his mantle, greatcoat, although not his cigars that we can see. Perhaps the two more surprising things that are apparently going though are Yarrick and Knight Commander Pask. Pask is really quite a fun tank commander, but maybe better known in the tabletop than he is the lore, but Yarrick is perhaps one of the single best known Guard characters out of any of them. It's not that long ago that Games Workshop released that Hammer and Bolter episode Old Baelai, basically hyping up the rivalry between Yarrick and Ghazghkull. I think you can look at their going from several different perspectives. From a lore kind of perspective, I guess it's really not that hard to justify Guard characters going away. Unlike most of the other races in 40k, they do have just normal human lifespans. They're not going to be kicking around for that long, particularly with the evolving storyline going many hundreds of years down the line. I don't really know that it's a particularly good reason to remove much loved models and rules though. It's not like we haven't had characters that are present in codexes that have been long since fluffed dead, say for example the Blood Angels Captain Tycho. He's been in the codex for ages despite being killed off in Armageddon. Lore-wise though, it'll be interesting to see if we get any clues as to why they're gone in the new Guard Codex. Has Yarrick finally met his end fighting Ghazghkull, or is he just whereabouts unknown at the moment, having gone off to search for him? Models-wise, I feel like all of these are victims of Games Workshop's range rotation policy, having Finecast models basically taken out of production, as Games Workshop tries to move away from their resin line and take everything into plastic. They did say that all the models that are rotated will be returned at some point, but as we've seen from other Codex releases, it doesn't seem that that guarantees that they come back in terms of rules or anything, or even come back permanently. It looks like the models might just occasionally go up for made to order, and you can buy them regardless or not if they've got actual any functional rules in the current version of the game. I feel like Creed himself is unlikely to come back, seeing as they've released his daughter as a new Lord Castellan. Pask I feel like is probably low on the priority list for them to update, maybe if they ever release some sort of specific tank commander type kit. But I feel like Yarrick at some point might well get his own plastic model. He is certainly one of the most loved Guard characters, and if they do take him away then people would absolutely love to see him come back. Perhaps if they decide to re-release Armageddon Steel Legion, he could be a nice tie-in with that maybe. Otherwise, rules-wise, if you do already have the models, I feel like they're all going to be pretty easy to use in-game still. I'm sure you could just play Creed's model with his daughter's rules. Kel might need to stand in for something like an Administrorum Priest or a Regimental Standard in a command squad perhaps. Tank commanders still seem to be a thing, so Pass can basically just be one of those, a fancy Cadian one with a relic or something maybe. And I'm sure Yarrick will be able to represent a Lord Commissar. A bit sad not to have special rules for him though. Out of this lot, I'd say the biggest single loss is Yarrick, perhaps both from a fluff and a gameplay perspective. He was certainly an interesting option that could go in quite a lot of Guard army lists with his rerolls and things. Next up is a rule that I'm kind of surprised that people are missing so much to be honest, but apparently grinding advance is going away, and a fair few people weren't particularly happy about that. Grinding Advance is the half move for double shots on turret weapons for the Lehman Russ, and to be honest I did quite like it as a rule, a bit of a bolt-on rule to actually make Lehman Russes kind of dangerous, and I actually think that the gameplay implications of it are quite nice. Basically you have limited movement if you want to fire to full effect, or if you find yourself out of position and need to get somewhere fast you still can, but you will pay for it in shots. Arguably it's more of a limitation than a buff, but provided it's backed up with enough damage output, I still think it's kind of good. I think most people are concerned that Grinding Advance going away means that Russes will be really underpowered, but honestly I think there's no reason to think that just from that deletion of the rule alone. What's going to decide whether they're good or not is their gun profiles and their points cost. Just from the other leaks of the Codex alone, never mind any other goodies that we might have, the turrets are supposedly going to Ballistic Skill 3+, even for the standard Russes. That's a really nice boost. I'm pretty much certain that the damage profile for the guns will be baked into the weapons profile itself, rather than having to be arbitrarily doubled to be in some way efficient. For example, we saw the Relic Gatekeeper battle cannon, that's going to go to D3+6 shots, and I have a feeling that that's quite likely to follow suit for the standard battle cannons in the terms of the number of shots at least. That'd kind of be a double buff really. The average number of shots would go up, as you'd usually get 7 with Grinding Advance on average, but with D3+6 you'd get an average of 8, which is better, plus better ballistic skill, plus you'd have less variance as well, and less chance of rolling snake eyes at a really crucial roll. On top of all that, it'd mean that you'd be likely to be able to move and fire to full effect, presuming that the moving characteristic of the Lehman Russ still goes to 10 inches. That means you'd be able to get line of sight on things a lot easier, and likely be hammering away with a much more powerful gun on top of that. To be honest, quite a lot of the profiles of the Lehman Russ turrets are showing their age a bit. I think a rewrite could be pretty good for them. Certain options like the Eradicator Nova Cannon and the Vanquisher Cannon are just woefully underpowered. Hopefully with a bit more thought, a few more of the turret variants might be a bit more usable, and I suspect that the whole lot are going to be getting a bit more dangerous overall, though admittedly it might mean that it comes with a points increase. Overall, my take on that is there's absolutely no point in getting annoyed at the loss of Grinding Advance until you've seen the full Lehman Russ profile. I strongly suspect that it's going to be just as good, if not better, given the usual power boost from 9th edition codexes. I think perhaps the biggest concern is that overall whether or not it gets massively underpowered compared with the Rogue or Dawn, but to be honest I'm quite optimistic that Russes will remain a sturdy centrepiece for the Guard. It's hard to imagine Games Workshop letting them languish as a terrible choice for too long. Next, and something that I'll admit I'm a little bit more disappointed about, is the way that Games Workshop has rejigged the regiments. Given their own previews and the leaks, it really does sound like regimental rules will literally just be your pick of 2 traits from this list. It's basically the equivalent of the custom chapters or custom craft worlds system for other codexes, but in Guard that seems to be all we're getting, rather than that plus the standard regiments. It seems that unlike in other codexes, the actual regiment keyword might only matter for a few units with support options, say the specific Cadian shock troops, which I'm sure will actually have the Cadian tag, or maybe certain special characters such as Ursula Creed. I'm not saying the system doesn't have some benefits. It does mean that you can freely mix and match regiments of any sort without any sort of backlash from the rules, but I do feel like we'd lose a fair amount of flavour for each of the regiments there. You'll lose stratagems, so no more Firstborn Pride for Vostroyans. There won't be any more regiment-specific relics, warlord traits, or unique orders either, all of which might give you additional reasons to play one regiment over another, even if maybe the choice of trait isn't super duper optimal. Overall, I'm sure that the rules will wind up being at least reasonably strong in general, but I feel like it might be a bit of a flavour loss for the Guard Codex, just due to having different regiments that are somewhat balanced being really quite good ways of incentivising different ways to build lists, rather than just defaulting to the standard best thing. Maybe they'll be balanced enough that some people take ones that are more focused around infantry, and some take ones that are more focused around tanks perhaps, but I can't help but think that we might just wind up with loads of people running the exact same thing as with the Necron ones. Kind of hard to say exactly what that might be without the datasheets, but I do suspect that that single hit reroll plus the extra 4-inch range to guns seems like a very hard combo to pass up, particularly as just about every single unit in the Guard Dex is ranged, besides a few scant exceptions. Overall, I do feel like while there are positives, and not having any sort of requirements on exactly how your models are modelled, I do feel like it's a rather big section just to cut out entirely, and I do hope that the Codex has enough fun and in-depth stuff to make up for the loss. I will admit I do quite like Games Workshop's dog faction support system. I think when they're well balanced it makes it really interesting to pick one army over another, and gives you a lot of scope for weird quirky strategies with some of the lesser picked ones that people aren't quite as ready for, and I hope that this custom regiment system still allows for that. Finally, and pretty much a constant bugbear from the Ninth Codexes, are Wargear Restrictions. We won't know about the majority of these until we've seen the datasheets in detail, I guess, and I suppose that some of the most common ones that might get restricted have already just got removed wholesale, things like the special weapons or the veterans. It does perhaps seem that the place that this is actually going to be felt by current guard collectors, though, is in Scion squads. Currently, if you actually want to use the Scions as damage dealers as opposed to just objective holders and things, one of the best options is to spam a couple of special weapons in each unit, maybe something like 2 plasma guns or 2 melter guns, and then go off hunting the target that they're best against. Now it sounds like we're not going to be able to take 2 of the same special weapon in a 5-man unit. You can still take 2 special weapons, but they'd have to be 2 different ones, say for example a plasma gun and a melter gun, not 2 of 1. I also suspect that that'll be curtains for spamming special weapons in Scion command squads as well, another very popular melter or plasma delivery unit. There just aren't that many special weapons in the box, and usually that means Games Workshop will remove the option. This one's always a bit frustrating, and particularly for people who've set up their armies in one way, maybe converted a whole bunch of plasma guns, as I have myself. Though admittedly it does have some positives for new players. It means that you don't go have to hunting through multiple kits just to get one specific bit. Still though, it does seem like it could be a bit annoying for list building. They probably won't be quite as efficient against any one target, though hopefully the rules will still be strong enough to make them decent damage dealers in their own right. It's not like they couldn't be strong if they weren't pointed right, even if you can't take all one special weapon and make them a bit more efficient that way. Overall, certainly a little bit annoying. I think that is going to grate for some people. So overall, if these leaks do turn out to be accurate, then quite a lot of annoying things have changed or gone. Perhaps a surprising amount of stuff, maybe more than most of the codexes of 9th edition so far. I know it's maybe a little bit easy to feel a bit negative about changes like this, but to be honest I would try and wait till the actual codex is out and see what's on offer. Despite a few things that I really quite like going from the codex, I still think that overall it could be a very positive one for the Guard, particularly if they've added in a bunch of fun stuff to replace the old. Should be some interesting list building options with things like platoons coming back, plus little variants of units like Cadian shock troops and Death Corps of Krieg units might be interesting to experiment with. Standing on the back of the biggest Guard model released for over a decade as well probably doesn't hurt either. It's still looking like a very exciting time to be collecting Imperial Guard. Overall, I'd say the biggest losses in my book are the veterans and the special weapon squads. Both of those I liked a lot and could add an interesting dimension to foot guard lists. I'm not the biggest fan of the idea of losing unique regiment special rules. I think that could give you a lot of flavour towards playing one army or another. And some of the special characters and Yarrick going is also pretty sad. Let me know your thoughts though. How optimistic are you for the Guard Codex overall? And are any of these particularly good options that you really didn't want to see go? In any case, if you've enjoyed a bit of discussion, feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics. I'll certainly keep the regular 40k videos coming, including plenty of coverage of the new Guard Codex as it comes out. I'm sure we'll have loads to talk about with so many new rules and a bunch of new units. I'll be hoping to make really quite a lot of Guard videos once the Codex drops. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well, and you can find that linked down in the video description if you're interested. Making all the content does take an awful lot of time and effort, and if you are enjoying quite a lot, any support is massively appreciated. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things happen next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with the chance to win some really big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you or you'd just like to help support, then the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.